When you think about World War II, a lot of people immediately picture D-Day or maybe Pearl Harbor.
Right.
But if you really want to get to the core of the war, I mean, where most of the fighting happened and where the outcome was really decided, you have to look east.
You absolutely do. We're talking about the Eastern Front, the war between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. And it wasn't just a battle, it was the largest, most brutal military conflict in all of human history.
The scale is just staggering.
It is. To put it in perspective for you, over 80% of all German combat casualties for the entire war happened on this one front. That scale is what decided everything.
Okay, so let's try to visualize that scale because it's hard to wrap your head around. We're talking about a front line thousands of miles long, stretching from Central Europe all the way deep into the Soviet Union near the Ural Mountains. That space, that sheer size, it became one of Germany's biggest enemies.
And that conflict started with a bang. June 1941, Operation Barbarossa launches. It is the biggest military invasion ever. The German goal: a quick knockout blow.
The whole blitzkrieg or lightning war idea.
Exactly. They wanted to crush the Soviet Union before winter hit.
And at first, it was terrifyingly successful for the Germans, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. They moved so fast. Their organization, their tanks, they just rolled over everything and caught the Soviet command completely flat-footed.
So entire armies were just gone.
Encircled. Thousands of planes and tanks destroyed before they could even move. But here's the critical mistake the Germans made. They planned for a short campaign. They didn't do the math on what it takes to supply an army that deep inside Russia for a long time.
But why? I mean, didn't they see the risk? The sheer distance. Western powers like the U.S. had figured out long-distance supply. Why did Germany fail so badly at this?
It's what strategists call the friction of distance. Every single mile their tanks drove east, the amount of fuel, ammo, and parts they needed just shot up exponentially.
And the roads were terrible.
Or non-existent. By the time they got near Moscow, their supply lines were stretched so thin they were basically starving the front lines of everything they needed.
And that's where the geography itself starts to fight back. The ground there wasn't all the same, was it?
Not at all. You had everything. Thick forests, huge marshes, and then those massive, wide-open grasslands, the steppes.
So the landscape itself really shaped the battles.
Completely. Up north, around Leningrad, the ground is wet and swampy, a total nightmare for tanks. It really helps the defenders.
But down south?
Down south, it's flatter, drier, perfect for big tank battles. That's where the Germans expected their blitzkrieg to just work perfectly.
But even there, the size of the country meant they could never control everything.
Never. You can take a city, sure, but the countryside is vast and hostile. It gives the Soviet forces endless room to fall back, regroup, and for partisans to start operating.
And if the land wasn't enough of a problem, then came the weather.
Oh, the weather. People think it was just the cold, but it was so much more than that. It hit them in every season.
Let's start with summer, which they were counting on.
Right. It wasn't mild. It was intense heat and these huge clouds of dust from the tanks and trucks. So much dust it would clog the engines. I mean, literally choke the air filters and force vehicles to stop for maintenance right when they needed to be moving fast.
And then autumn arrives, the rainy season.
And with it, the Rasputitsa, the roadless season. Unrelenting rain just turns every dirt road into this deep, thick, impassable mud.
So it's not just a slowdown.
It's a total shutdown. It completely negates Germany's technological advantage. Their heavy, high-tech trucks just sink, gone.
So this mud, the Rasputitsa, it kind of leveled the playing field. Suddenly, the high-tech German army is moving at the same speed as Soviets using horses and carts.
Exactly. And then comes winter.
The famous Russian winter.
The extreme cold. We're talking temperatures down to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And this is a killer blow because the Germans just weren't ready for it.
And it wasn't just the soldiers feeling the cold, right? The machines stopped working.
Yes! That's a fascinating detail. The engine oil, the lubricants in the guns, it would literally turn into thick wax. Rifles wouldn't fire. You couldn't start a tank without spending hours preheating it, which was incredibly dangerous.
Meanwhile, the Soviets.
They were used to it. They had the right clothing, the right gear. They knew how to survive in it. They turned the winter into a weapon.
Wow. So the environment is just systematically dismantling the German war machine. And we haven't even talked about the human cost for the soldiers yet.
Which was, beyond brutal for both sides. Think about the conditions. Sleeping in frozen dirt, constant food shortages, total exhaustion, day in, day out.
And it wasn't just the enemy trying to kill you.
No. The non-combat threats were just as bad. Diseases like typhus spread like wildfire in those conditions, and frostbite.
Yeah.
So many soldiers lost limbs to frostbite without ever seeing an enemy soldier.
What does that do to your mindset?
It creates this unbelievable intensity. Both sides felt they were fighting for their very existence, for their nation, their people. The normal rules of war just went out the window. The stress and isolation must have been immense.
And that intensity led to some of history's most defining battles. Let's start with the Siege of Leningrad.
Right. It started almost immediately. In 1941, German forces surrounded the city completely, cut it off, and that blockade lasted for almost 900 days.
900 days.
The suffering of the civilians inside was just staggering. People were surviving on tiny bread rations, sometimes just 125 grams a day, and it was mostly sawdust.
In the middle of winter, with no heat or electricity?
And yet, they refused to surrender. That defiance is what's so incredible about Leningrad. They even built something called the Road of Life.
The Road of Life.
In the winter, they created a supply route across a huge frozen lake, Lake Ladoga.
Wow. Under constant German fire, I imagine.
Constantly. But it was our only lifeline. They brought in tiny amounts of food and medicine and evacuated the sick and starving. It was a huge psychological victory for the Soviets.
Which brings us to the biggest turning point of all, Stalingrad.
The big one, an industrial city on the Volga River. Capturing it would cut off Soviet oil supplies, so it was vital.
And the fighting there was something else entirely.
It was called the Rat War. Street to street, house to house fighting, sometimes room to room inside, destroyed factories. Tanks were useless in the rubble. The casualties were just horrific, hundreds of thousands on both sides.
So the Germans got bogged down in the city.
Fatally bogged down. And while they were focused on taking the last few buildings, the Soviet army was preparing a massive counterattack, Operation Uranus.
Launched in the winter of 42.
And it was a brilliant trap. They smashed through the weaker Romanian and Italian forces on the German flanks and completely surrounded the entire German 6th Army inside Stalingrad.
Trapped them.
Trapped. With no supplies, no fuel. Eventually, their commander, Field Marshal Paulus, surrendered. This was a huge deal. A German field marshal had never surrendered before. It shattered the myth that the German army was unbeatable.
So after Stalingrad, the momentum of the entire war shifts.
Completely. And this is where we see those huge tank battles, especially down on the southern steppes. This all leads up to the Battle of Kursk in 1943.
Germany's last big shot to win back control.
Right. They brought out their newest, biggest tanks, the Tiger and the Panther. They were planning one massive, decisive attack, but the Soviets knew it was coming.
And they were ready for it.
They'd built these incredible defenses miles deep, so it was less of a quick battle and more of a brutal head-on collision.
And this is where the actual tank designs became super important, right?
Absolutely. The German Tiger was powerful with thick armor, but the Soviets were mass-producing the T-34.
The T-34. I've heard so much about that tank.
It was a game changer. Simple to build, easy to fix, and its armor was sloped. That slope design made it much harder for German shells to penetrate. It was brilliant.
So it's not just about quality, it's about quantity and good design. The Soviets could just build more of them.
A lot more.
Yeah.
And when you're fighting a war of attrition across thousands of miles, volume wins.
And while all this is happening at the front, there's another war going on behind the lines.
A whole different kind of war. The partisans. The resistance fighters.
Who were these people?
Former soldiers, local aliens, anyone who knew the forests and swamps. And they were experts at guerrilla warfare. Their goal was to paralyze the German supply system.
So they'd attack the trains.
Exactly. Attacking supply trains, cutting communication wires, anything to create chaos for the German commanders.
And that had a real impact.
A huge impact. It didn't just slow things down. It forced the German army to pull combat soldiers away from the front just to guard railways. That was a massive drain on their manpower.
Which brings us to this other, almost hidden factor in the Soviet victory. Their industrial power.
It's an incredible story of national sacrifice. The Soviets knew their factories in the West would be captured or destroyed.
So they moved them.
They literally moved them. Thousands of factories. They put the machinery, the tools, the workers on trains and shipped them east to the Ural Mountains and Siberia, far away from German bombs.
I can't even imagine the logistics of that.
It's mind-boggling. And they would set these factories up in the middle of winter, sometimes in tents, and just start working.
And who was doing the work?
Mostly women and teenagers. They took over the jobs of the men who were fighting. It was a total national effort.
And the result was that they just outproduced Germany.
By a lot. More tanks, more planes, more artillery. That's how you win a long war of attrition. You make sure your soldiers never run out of stuff to fight with.
So after Stalingrad, it's basically a long 2-year retreat for the Germans.
A brutal, bloody retreat. They fought desperately for every inch of ground, often destroying everything as they fell back.
But the Soviet army pushing them back was a totally different beast now.
Oh, yeah. Faster, better equipped, and incredibly experienced. They just kept pushing west, liberating all those cities that had been destroyed years before.
And that long road ends in one place, Berlin, April 1945.
The final battle. The Soviets surround the capital with an overwhelming force.
And the fighting is just as vicious as ever.
Street by street, right to the very end. But the outcome was never in doubt. The symbolic end came when the Soviet flag was raised over the Reichstag, the German parliament building. The war in Europe was over.
So when we look back, what's the legacy of all this? The human cost is just incomprehensible.
Tens of millions dead, soldiers and civilians, entire societies shattered.
And politically, it changed the world.
It did. The Soviet Union emerges from the war as a global superpower. The map of Eastern Europe is redrawn, and that sets the stage for the next big global conflict, the Cold War.
The Eastern Front was just this clash of unbelievable scale and intensity. You had geography buying time, weather destroying technology, and in the end, industrial power winning the war. You really can't understand World War II without understanding this front.
Absolutely not. And when you think about it, that whole effort moving factories, the sacrifices people made, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What are the limits of what a society can do when it truly believes its existence is on the line? How does that change what's possible in a conflict?